The Philippines is a collection of over 7,000 islands situated at the entrance of the South China Sea in the Pacific Ocean. The Philippines forms at the outer edge of maritime Southeast Asia and for much of its modern history has served as a gateway between Western powers and continental Asia. A former colony of both Spain and the United States, the Philippines today consists of three island clusters, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon houses the country's capital, Manila, which is the political, cultural, and economic heart of the Philippines today. It is highly urbanized compared to the rest of the country, and its large ports and deep harbor account for 1/3 of the Philippines' GDP. Mindanao has been full of political unrest and violent movements and is mainly populated by Muslim Moro tribes. The Philippines is shaped by rigid geographic, social, and economic divisions between a predominantly urban north and a heavily agricultural and poorer south. This, as well as the island geography, makes effective nationalism difficult and also undermines Manila's efforts to play a stronger role throughout the South China Sea region or guard against other nations, mainly China, which are infringing upon their national waters. This weakness is apparent today as China's increasingly aggressive moves to assert its own maritime claims test Manila's voice in groups like ASEAN, as well as its alliance with the US. With all of this in mind, we will investigate whether the Philippines can become the next Asian tiger.
Since President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016, more than 30 infrastructure projects worth more than $23 billion have been approved. These projects include building a subway, expanding roads, and improving the irrigation system north of Manila. In 2016, the Duterte administration announced they were launching the Build, Build, Build program in order to create a golden age of infrastructure.
There are several problems that the Philippines are facing that restrict their ability to reach the standard of the Asian tigers. Some of the main problems are based in the Duterte administration failing to protect its people from corruption at the national level. Since the 1990s, economic and political dynasties have ruled the Philippines. When large corporations have a large stake in the government, the poorer population is misrepresented. Also, bureaucratic corruption within the police is impacting the population as a whole. According to the New York Times, in the past 3 years, nearly 4,800 people have been killed by Filipino police, and many of their cases have been unanswered in court. Despite these shortcomings, Duterte is trying to produce a more representative democracy by changing the constitution. Duterte's administration is attempting to democratize the country's social and economic landscape by reducing protections for state corporations and increasing political representation of the poor majority. With the constitutional reform, senators would no longer be elected through nationwide elections. Instead, similar to the United States, they would represent individual states. With a more representative government, regulation of the economy to engineer economic growth would act in favor of the poorer population.
Pollution in the Philippines is a major issue. Much of the forest is being cut down to help the Philippines grow their economy, and it is leading to poor living conditions in rural areas. Due to the poor living condition, the people living in these rural areas are moving to large cities like Manila, which suffer from extreme air and water pollution. The city is suffering from a lack of adequate sewers and clean water as well. However, it is not just the cities that are suffering, but ocean life is suffering as well. The once rich ocean life of the Philippines is rapidly declining. The runoff from the city pours into the sea, killing many mangrove swamps that serve as nursery grounds for many species of fish. Furthermore, dynamite fishers who drop dynamite on reefs and collect all the dead fish, are causing tremendous damage to the whole ecosystem of the ocean, especially these coral reefs. The government is attempting to make strides towards a healthier environment through acts like the banning of leaded gasoline in Manila and the creation of the Coastal and Marine Management Office, but the environmental issues are still brutally bad. And worst of all is the plastic pollution. More than 17 billion, and yes, I mean billion, plastic bags are being used a year in the Philippines alone. This extreme usage leads to thick layers of plastic all over the water and has created some of the world's most polluted beaches right in the Philippines. The environmental issues are holding back the Philippines in their attempt to become the next Asian tiger.
Following decades of relatively slow economic growth, in recent years, the Philippines' economy has progressed much more rapidly, and economic growth statistics seem to point the Philippines in a good direction. After about 40 years of a GDP growth rate under 4%, the average GDP since 2000 has been 5.1%, while the past 7 years has seen a growth of 6.3%. These numbers seem to point the Philippines in a direction towards a strong economy, but there are still many factors that hurt this country's chances of economic dominance. Much of the recently created wealth in the Philippines is being consumed by a few influential families and enterprises, while poverty and underemployment rates have not seen much improvement. Let's take a look at some startling statistics about this fact. According to the 2011 Forbes Wealth List, the 40 richest families in the Philippines accounted for 76% of the country's GDP. And, according to the Forbes 2012 Annual Rich List, the two wealthiest people in the Philippines were worth a combined $13.6 billion, which is 6% of the economy. In contrast, about 25 million people, or 1/4 of the population, lived on $1 a day or less in 2009. To add on, weak regulatory agencies, along with the aggressive privatization of strategic sectors, such as electricity, have created prohibitive utility costs, which has discouraged greenfield investments from multinational companies. Corruption scandals and legal regulatory uncertainty has undermined the Aquino administration's efforts to finalize a single large-scale infrastructure project for many years. The product of these statistics is one of Asia's most unbalanced societies that is littered with economic issues that are hurting its ability to flourish. But now, under Duterte, more than $23 billion worth of infrastructure projects have been approved. The goal of these projects is to create a golden age of infrastructure in the Philippines. Things are starting to look a little better for the Philippines, but with all the problems and internal conflicts that are present, its likelihood to be the next Asian tiger is low. So, what can explain this disconnect between a strong economy and a faltering job growth? The Philippines' economic freedom score is 63.8, ranking the country the 70th freest in the 2019 index. Its overall score has decreased by 1.2 points over the previous year. As of now, the four Asian tigers of Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea rank 1st, 2nd, 10th, and 29th on the index. For reference, the US falls at 12 and Japan at 30. Now, a free market is by no means necessary for a prosperous economy. However, considering the Philippines is a democracy that values the livelihood of its people, it is something that should be considered. The correlation between a free market and a prosperous job output is clear. Not to mention, on a 100-point score, Duterte's government scores a 30.9 in government integrity. More than 4 in 10 Filipinos who are poor actually have jobs. They continue to struggle with poverty because they are employed in poor quality jobs that pay less than what their counterparts in manufacturing industries get.
The Philippines has been a hotbed for conflict since the turn of the century. It has mainly been between four groups: the MNLF, the Moro Nationalist Liberation Front, who are followers of Islam who seek self-rule. In 1996, a peace agreement was signed, and this allowed for their leaders to run for office. It was successful. Their leader, Masari, took a government position and then led an uprising in 2001. However, it failed. Since then, the MNLF have had more ambushes and rebellions, but have since declined in power. On the other hand, the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, now have the largest rebel group and seek a separate Islamic state in the southern Philippines. In 2001, a comprehensive deal was reached. The agreement called for the formation of a new, larger, autonomous region in the southern Philippines. The third group happens to be the most radical, the Abu Sayyaf. They have bombed the Philippines multiple times and have taken many hostages. Their current leader was recently arrested, and their current status is unsure, but some believe that they might be linked to Al-Qaeda. The final group is the New People's Army. They are the military wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines. They use guerrilla-style warfare in their attempts to take over the Filipino government. They have been close to an agreement, but there has been no official agreement between them and the Filipino government yet. What the future holds is unsure, but these groups are for sure no hope in the Philippines' attempt in becoming an Asian tiger.
The Philippines have undoubtedly made a lot of progress in recent years to turn their country around. However, there are simply too many domestic issues that it has to deal with before it can ever truly reach its potential and possibly become another Asian tiger.